my first order of business again is to welcome you. Please have a seat if you can. And if we run out of seats, we'll try and find some more. But I would like to introduce Dr. Jim Beard. And Dr. Jim Beard is no stranger to most of us here at Catawba. He taught here for many years, a retired chemistry professor, but more important, he was one of the brains behind this event. And he's going to come up here and continue the welcome and introductions and get this started. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Lee. I appreciate it. I'm the co-chair of the Environmental Justice Committee of the Reimagine America Project, or we generally go, for short, we just call it RAP. But we have been very much involved in considering items of systemic racism and racial justice. We all got started by one of the people here on the panel, Jennifer Roberts, and Rodney Sadler, who unfortunately can't be here tonight, met during the protest over the murder of George Floyd, got to talking quite deeply about what was going on with race in our country, and just concluded we got to do something different. We just can't keep doing this over and over and over again. And so out of that, they developed the Reimagine America Project. A little later on, I got involved, and I have much interest in the environment, and I have a lot of interest in racial justice. And so I became the co-chair of the Environmental Justice Committee. We obviously have overlap with the groups that are here: Catawba College, Center for the Environment, the NAACP. All of these organizations overlap in terms of the business of racial justice and our interest in it. And so I would like to thank Catawba College for these fine facilities and helping us to bring this off. I would like to introduce the members of the organizing committee. I've already mentioned Jennifer Roberts, Dr. Mercedes Quesada Embiid from Catawba was on the organizing committee, Kathy Green as well. The Reverend Janet Garner Mullins, she's not here, unfortunately. She had a conflict, and so did Dr. Sadler,
She's so great.
but he was on the committee too. So
That's great.
thanks to all the people who helped put this together. And now let me turn the program to the moderator.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ball, for the welcome and the introduction. And thank you so much, Dr. Beard, for being here and getting us started. So I just have a few things to say that are sort of like housekeeping things. Firstly, thanks for spending the evening with us. We're really very excited. We've got sort of a full house here in the room, and we also have a pretty full house virtually. So we've got some participants that are joining remotely, and they're going to be an active part of this session as much as we can in the same way that you all here in the room are going to be active. And I'm very excited. We've got such a wonderful spectrum of speakers here with regard to their expertise and backgrounds in climate and social justice work. And I just want to remind the students that are in the room, thanks for being here too. There's a sign-up sheet going around, so do make sure that you get your name on there if you haven't already. And for everybody else, this is designed to be, very not only informative and inspiring and all of that and impactful, but this is meant to be interactive, right? We really want you involved. We really want you participating. The way we're going to start things off is that I've got a sort of, good intro question for each of these four folks here at the front. And instead of reading their bios to you, which you already received, right? You can look through those on your own time. I'm going to ask a question that sort of reveals their expertise and allows them to tell a little bit about themselves, more connected to the content, so that we can sort of really get started. And I'll do that with each of them. We do have a set of slides here and imagery that the panelists have provided, but it's not going to feel like a keynote from each of them, right? This is going to be sort of speed moving through these slides because they each only have about 5 minutes to answer the question. And although the students will definitely confirm that I am not the best timekeeper in the room, right? I should not be in charge of this, but I will do my best to keep everybody on task. I just want to hear from you. I want you to keep talking, right? So, but I will do my best to be attentive to that clock and get us out of here by 8 o'clock, because all of you, I'm sure, do want to find your way home at some reasonable hour this evening. So we'll move through these slides. We can always come back to the slides if an audience member had a question that referred back to something very specific that they saw and that the speaker did not get a chance to attend to in a more detailed fashion. Okay. And so a couple of other things with regard to rules of engagement that I'll say is that, we're a big group online and a big group here. And this is a climate justice conversation, right? It's a dialogue on some sensitive issues.
Yeah.
And for some of us in the room, this is an intellectual exercise, right? And so a conscientious conversation. But for some of us in the room, this is not only intellectual and inspiring in that regard, this is lived experience. And so we want to honor that. And we want to make sure that those folks that are in the room who have lived what we're talking about in more direct ways, that allowing that to become a courageous conversation for them, right? Allowing this room to be safe space for them to share what they need to share. So hopefully this conversation opens up many of your sensibilities, but we also want to be sensitive to the different stories in the room that we don't all know, and all the backgrounds that we aren't yet familiar with. So with that, I would like to get us started. And like I said, I've got questions in my pockets, in my mind that I'm thinking about, but we really want to hear from you. So don't make me fill in the space. You guys come up to the mic, we'll run around with the microphone so that we can hear from questions in this audience as well as the virtual audience. And so far, have you been able to hear everyone okay? Yeah? Okay, great. Well, I'm going to flip to my little question here. And we're going to start with Mr. Edgar Miller, who is Yadkin River Keeper, really takes pride in saying that he speaks for the river. And so we want to get started with Edgar. And, much of the success of any climate justice initiative is grounded in an understanding of the ecological and the environmental issues that communities face. Could you speak to how climate change impacts the Yadkin PD River watershed? In particular, how do these impacts disproportionately affect communities of color in the region?
Thank you, Mercedes, and it's great to be here. My second panel discussion in the last 2 weeks here in this room in the same seat. So it's great to see another great crowd here. And I felt bad last time because I didn't bring any maps, and Lee said that he really loved to see maps of watersheds. So I thought I would throw a few of those up here. For those of you who aren't familiar with the Yadkin River Keeper, we're headquartered in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. I live across the river in Lexington and Davidson County, and am just always had a great connection with Catawba, member of the First United Church of Christ, first reformed in Lexington, which also has a long history with Catawba. So it's great to be here. Some of our supporters, Andrew Jacobson, just recently elected to the Yadkin River Keeper Board. So good job. Appreciate that. So just quickly, because I know we want to get to questions and discussion, this is our entire Yadkin PD River Basin. And as you can see at the very heart of that basin, the red shading for High Rock Lake, which shows that it is impaired for several different issues, chlorophyll A, turbidity, pH. So that heart of our circulatory system here in this watershed is under siege, and the state is in the process of developing regulations to reduce nutrients and sediments going into that. So that is our number one advocacy priority, to get High Rock Lake to no longer be red. And I hope we can do that over the next few years. Next slide, once again, for Lee's benefit, this just shows you how extensive water is in our basin. Once again, a living, breathing system that is currently under attack from a lot of different forces. So next slide, please. And this is from our Roadmap to a Cleaner Yadkin report. This is the current land cover, the red area being the developed or paved area. Next slide, please. And the U.S. Forest Service projections are by 2060 that the amount of developed land, paved land, essentially in the watershed will double to almost 30% of the watershed being paved.
Oof. Wow.
Just very briefly, I think most of you are familiar with climate change, the root of climate change. If we can get the next slide, please. This is a picture that I took of the coal ash disposal areas. This is at the Bowie's Creek, which is actually in the Dan River watershed. I hadn't really thought about it, but I first did this presentation for a summer camp that our former board member, Sharon Grant, Dr. Sharon Grant at the Hood Theological Seminary invited me to do. And it just made me remember that coal ash disposal is one of those things caused by the fossil fuels that are burned that create climate change that actually does disproportionately impact communities of color, just like here at Dukeville, here at Bowie's Creek, that is the Walnut Cove community. And now in their case, they are digging that up and then reburying it at the same site, unlike at the Buck Steam Station where our lawsuit before my time required them to take that coal ash and recycle it and move it elsewhere. So I think we're all familiar with what causes climate change. It is exacerbated by CAFOs and deforestation, so other bigger concerns that we're working on, particularly on the CAFO issue with poultry farms in the Upper Basin. Next slide. And this is just an example. This is the flooding of the Davidson Water Reserve reservoirs in 2020. And this was just kind of a run-of-the-mill storm, but the river crested at major flood stages, which just 2 weeks ago, January 10th storm, the river rose 25 feet in 24 hours. And so you can see climate change is just making everything worse. More frequent and intense storms, more runoff and flooding, more sedimentation and pollutants, those nutrients that are causing harmful algal blooms, which are also increased by increased temperatures. And then we have droughts. And then when we have droughts and more heat, more algae blooms. Another example, another thing that we're dealing with is development and the lack of enforcement of sedimentation and erosion controls. Next slide, please. This is a stream near my house where a new development was put in and a small headwater stream destroyed. And this, once again, was not a huge rain that caused this event. And then, as I mentioned, the biggest problem we have on the lakes, the Yak and Pelee lakes, are the harmful algal blooms. Next slide. And this is just a small patch of what they call the black gnat algae, which is a cyanobacteria, not technically an algae, that creates cyanotoxins. And those are harmful to humans and pets. And so High Rock has been determined to be impaired for chlorophyll A, which is an indicator of algae blooms and excessive nutrients. So this is becoming a bigger problem. It's a worse problem on Tuckertown and on Baden than it is on High Rock, but it's everywhere. So what can we do? Of course, the broader things, reducing fossil fuels, developing alternative energy, advocating in our case for water quality standards to reduce pollution, improve stormwater management and wetland and floodplain protection, and stream buffer conservation. So those are all very important tools in our toolbox to try to mitigate the impacts of climate change. From an environmental justice standpoint, I really kind of struggled with this a little bit. Next slide, please. Sometimes it's hard to really pinpoint that, but as I mentioned, the disproportionate impact on BIPOC communities of coal ash disposal. This is a photograph of a situation we have in urban Winston-Salem, where the Smith Reynolds Airport has clear cut some land and caused severe stream erosion in a predominantly Black community that, of course, was built there when developments were redlined and those communities were put in floodplains or marginal areas. And so they're really taking the brunt of some of this. Most of the urban areas sewer lines run through these same creek beds and they overflow frequently. I think the city of Winston-Salem has had, it's like I get notices once or twice a week about sewer overflows. So all of these things are leading to great environmental justice concerns. Next slide, please. Just a little few more photos of the Barkwood Street situation with the airport. You can see this particular home is about ready to fall into the creek, or their little storage shed, and we have lost some buildings. But fortunately, due to our advocacy, the state and the city of Winston and Forsyth County have put $1 million into doing a stream restoration project, and we are pushing them to fund more to prevent this kind of flooding and blowout. Just one last thing to wrap up. We have also developed, or in the process of developing, an environmental justice mapping tool. Next slide. And this is going to help us kind of overlay where communities of color are and where they're facing certain environmental issues. So this is going to be a great tool for us. We have several data layers in it now, and we'll continue to develop that, and particularly as it relates to flooding and other disproportionate impacts. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Edgar. Really appreciate all of the detail that you shared. And, be thinking about the questions that you're crafting, right? Be thinking about what you might want to circle back to with Edgar. We're going to move on to our next panelist, however, and this is Mr. Jamel A. Black. Jamel is sort of a local hero / leader in this community, is the president of the Salisbury-Rowan chapter of the NAACP. Now, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People is one of, if not the longest standing social justice organization in the country, right? So we've got a very strong chapter here, led by Jamel. And so I've got a question for you as well. As we learn more and more about the compounding impacts of climate change, many are coming to realize that any work for climate justice is simultaneously work for social justice. In fact, the national stage of the NAACP has become very vocal on the persistent overlaps of the socio-ecological. In what ways do you believe that the intergenerational empowerment work that you foster here in Salisbury-Rowan can help bring peace and build confidence in our community in order to create the necessary surge for new kinds of decision-making and significant systemic change?
Well, thank you. First of all, foremost, good evening. I am Jamel Black, current president of the Salisbury-Rowan NAACP, which is the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. 115 years old. Here locally, 45 years old we'll be celebrating. I do want to recognize Keisha Brown, which is a part of the executive committee. Megan is back there, part of our executive committee. Smiles, who joined here with me tonight. So to go back to the question, NAACP is the oldest and the boldest, and we know that we cannot address climate change without addressing other social justice issues. We're a voice for the voiceless. Our part is to educate, to make sure that those communities that's been affected, which most of those communities does look like me, that's been affected by this issue, is at the forefront, to be educated about it, to know what's going on, but how we challenge that. So here locally, we do have a strong chapter, and we're proud of being a strong chapter, winning Thalheimer's Awards on a national level, but continue to build locally. We bringing in programs, programs like our ceasefire programs, or which to address gun violence, right? So it all intertwines. Or even looking at programs like our Color Change, which target 5-year-olds to 21-year-olds to help them build, to understand leadership skills, empowerment, to be able to advocate for those generations above. So we know what the past looked like, but now our job is to stay at the forefront, to make sure that we're educating our community, right? Particularly the community of color that's been affected by this issue, to be at that forefront, to really understand how it affected us. But we talk about a lot about climate change, but we also have to talk about the other social justice issues that happens in our communities, whether that gun violence, whether it's voting rights. We may not understand how we're intertwined. So that is definitely our job to make sure and be at the front for it, to show you how does it intertwine. I might have not answered the question fully, but if you give me the question back, I'd be happy to. I mean, it was a lot, it was a lot.
I'm famous for long questions, but no, you are answering the question, right? Really, I think the part that you could emphasize a little bit more is, in thinking about the color of change, for example, right? How intergenerational that is, 5-year-olds to 21-year-olds, right? Pulling them together on a Saturday, right? Bringing them all under the same roof. And not only does that kind of give us the impression of peace, but also you're building capacity in those young people. And so how do you think that the work that you do through Ceasefire and Color of Change, or some of these events, if we can go to the next slide, some of these events here help to, give people the sense of empowerment where they feel as if they can come and bring that systemic change to the table?
Changing the narrative. We oftentimes know that the things in the past, we don't want to keep that cycle the same. So when we look at programs like this, building Black entrepreneurship, right? We want people to be able to thrive and having their own business, but not only having their own business, but make sure that business is sustainable, just like any other business, right? When we look at when having Black women lead conversation, or even that's only two, but our ceasefire program, to definitely talk about the ceasefire program, where we win what you see a National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, and especially in the times of the George Floyd era, excuse me. It wasn't coincidental, or every NAACP was running to work with the police, right? More so NAACPs was running away from the police to challenge the police, but we said no, we want to work with, because if we want to change the mindset within a community that's been affected by these issues, we're going to have to partner too and work together. So we worked with our local law enforcement to say, hey, this is how we're going to address gun violence. So we went into these, I'm not going to say predominantly community of color, but we went into these communities that had that high gun crime or violent crimes, to definitely address those issues, to change the mindset, to be able to move forward. So my job is to definitely talk about the social justice, not just the climate justice, because we have to first fix the inequalities within the social justice to talk about the climate justice. So it all intertwines. So we start there to move here.
Thank you so much,
Oh,
Jamel.
Thank you.
And, he didn't get a chance to refer to all these images, but some of these things are referring to the programs that he was discussing. And we can come back to some of this as well as we move forward, but thank you so much. And now we are coming to Jeffrey Robbins. Jeffrey Robbins is the Executive Director of Clean Air NC. And Clean Air is an acronym, AIRE, and that stands for Actions and Innovations to Restore the Environment. And so we've gone from sort of watershed
Always wondered.
thinking to sort of local community thinking to now statewide thinking with Jeffrey. And so I'm going to share my question with you as well. When we speak of structures and systems in North Carolina, our minds often go to concentrated animal feeding operations in the eastern part of the state, to educational disparities between urban and rural areas, to the communicative deception and stronghold of much of the fossil fuel industry, and to the forever chemicals taking up toxic space in our rivers and in the air. Clean Air NC has taken on the large task of authentic allyship, crossing economic, policy, and cultural boundaries to inform and engage. Could you describe some of your organization's strategies and their successes in these varied complex initiatives?
Sure. That's loud. First of all, it's a pleasure to be here. I always like coming down to Salisbury and be at Catawba College. This is one of my favorite places, the wetlands in the back. But Clean Air focuses on three powerful determinants of public health in North Carolina, and that's climate change, air quality, and environmental justice. And it's really through advocacy and education and community-driven research where we are working to protect North Carolina's air quality and ensure that people have clean air to live healthier and happier lives. But when you look at our organization, we've had a number of successes. We're based in Charlotte. We have offices in the Raleigh-Durham area. And as a state agency, we are mindful of the many things that are happening across the state. Founded in 2002, we started our first campaign for children's health in 2007. We launched a statewide health program in 2012. Our first statewide air monitoring network was in 2017. And then in 2021, we started an organization called Charlotte-Mecklenburg Climate Leaders. And I think around our 5 programs, around environmental justice, community science, health, advocacy, and education, we really build on first understanding what's impacting the communities. And we lead with science, because if you don't understand what's happening in the environment, you don't have an opportunity to come to the table in terms of argument or in terms of taking on folks that don't believe in climate change. Leading with that fact base is what's important. The second component of what we do is really providing a level of education for folks. And we know people that are impacted by climate change rarely understand the science behind it, and that's the first thing that gets challenged. Right. Especially when you think about BIPOC communities. The third component of it is health. Health is one of the most foundational aspects of what is impacting people from a climate change standpoint. So if folks don't understand that if I'm breathing in particulate matter that's caused by diesel emissions in communities that have been redlined, that leads to things like heart disease, various forms of cancer. So you have to educate people so that then they understand why it's important for them to stand up and fight for what's right. The next component is really educating them on what is the process, right? The carbon plan that Duke is launching again this year is coming up. That's probably about 1,800 pages of very technical jargon that very few people understand. In fact, we had to bring in a consultant to help us demystify it. So it's one of those things where in terms of having people understand, hey, this is the process, this is where I need to be, you have to then teach them how to advocate. And that's where, as an organization, I look at us as one of the most complete organizations across the state because we handle all 5 of those areas fairly adeptly. I think when I look at what we're doing today, there's a couple of key issues. I mentioned the carbon plan. So we're going to be doing a statewide webinar to educate folks, community-based organizations, and folks that are on the front line of some of the energy production areas that Duke is producing. We're going to try to hit Duke between the eyes in terms of what they're doing financially, what they're doing in terms of not getting rid of the fossil fuels, and ensuring that people understand the process so that if you don't want to testify in front of the North Carolina Utilities Commission, that you get into a letter writing program to be able to tell folks what your impacts are and why it's important to speak your voice. I think the other area that we look at is in southeastern North Carolina with what's happening with CAFOs. So if you haven't seen the movie The Smell of Money, I would advise people to see that movie. Because what is happening in that community, in those communities where commercial agriculture on the hog and poultry front is destroying communities because of the lack of regulation and permit process that is not tilted in favor of communities. The other area is that when we work in communities and do a tremendous amount of research, and there's a level of trust that has to be built up. And one of the things that we're doing through one of the grants that we received is educating what is happening in terms of GIS mapping. So Edgar talked about mapping. We're doing the same thing where we're demystifying the information so that if you have an air monitor or you have an area that is an air monitor or being monitored by an air quality sensor, you have the ability to go out and look at and understand what's happening in your community. So in essence, we're at the forefront of trying to partner with communities, be an advocate for them, and then having them lean on us for understanding what's happening relative to climate and the environment.
Thank you so much, Jeffrey, for that great, great description of just the reach that Clean Air NC has and the practicality of the organization in addition to its significant impact. Thank you so much. Well, we're almost there. We've got one more panelist to hear from, and then it will be your turn to share your questions that you're crafting. I know you're active. I can see it in your eyes. You're there crafting your questions. You're ready. Okay, so we have now Miss Jennifer Roberts, who is not only an environmental justice advocate in practice, but also in her heart. She served as the 58th mayor of Charlotte, and we're very, very fortunate to have her closing out this introduction of our panelists. So, Jennifer, one cannot get much more complex than our governance structure. From your mayoral vantage point, you have been able to witness the human impacts of climate change on more disenfranchised individuals, including the BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, persons of color, and the LGBTQIA2S+ communities. You have also dedicated much time to the exploration of possibilities for solutions centered on environmental justice. From what you have seen, what are some challenges and solutions, both personal and public, that you believe are worth highlighting as exemplars of intersectional equity from which we can gain further perspective on climate justice?
Well, thank you, Mercedes. I'm going to stand up because I like to see people. And Mercedes just gave you the title for a whole course, which I'm not going to do tonight because you'll all fall asleep. But it's perfect that I'm going after Jeff because a lot of my slides are very good visual illustrations of the inequities that he's talked about. And so I love maps too, which is great. And this first one shows not where the CAFOs are, but where another horrible polluting industry is that is cutting down healthy trees, making them into pellets and shipping them to Europe for them to burn for clean energy, which we know it's not. It's called Enviva. And if you look at, it's hard to see, the black dots are where the Enviva plants are. They are in all low income, high minority population areas, every single one of them. And the same is true of CAFOs. When you visually see it, you know what climate and environmental justice is. By the way, one of the big impediments to solving climate justice and environmental justice is the fact that only 33% of Americans are familiar with the term. Yale Climate Communications does a great job of surveying the population. 33%, only 1/3. So you guys are all like way ahead of the game here. Give yourselves a pat on the back. But that is a big issue. If you don't know what the issue and the problem is, you cannot address it. Out of those 33%, well, looking at the whole amount, only 18% actually feel comfortable even talking about environmental justice and have a little bit of knowledge of it. So 33% have heard of it, 18% actually kind of know what it is. So we're working, all of us are working to change that. Next slide. So here's the other very visual representation of the challenge. I picked Mecklenburg County. It's where I live. It's where I was a county commissioner and I was mayor of Charlotte. And you can see what we call the crescent. If any of you are from Charlotte, you've heard of this. I'm losing my earpiece. That's what you get when you have a lot of hair. I'm just going to hold it. So the crescent is also along major highways because air pollution comes from cars until we all get EVs. And again, those highways were built through Black and brown neighborhoods. And those neighborhoods continue to breathe that air in. So you see 85 kind of cuts across there, 77 goes down, the dark areas, high poverty areas of Mecklenburg County. The map on the left is where those neighborhoods were redlined early in the 20th century. Banks would not lend money. People couldn't build homes. Those areas were run down. They had landfills. I know a lot of ministers in Charlotte who have their churches in Black neighborhoods on the landfills, covered over the landfills. That's where the low-income Black and brown neighborhoods are. That's not healthy air. Next slide. The other thing that is so evident, this is a great website. Any of you doing public health or looking at the connection between environment and health, this is the CDC website called Places. It has an interactive map. You can pick anywhere in the United States. You can plug in asthma, cancer, diabetes. This again is Mecklenburg. These show high concentrations of chronic illnesses related to poor environmental quality. On the right, diabetes, high blood pressure, heart disease, and asthma. And if you have really bad asthma and you are a worker or a student, you're going to miss some days of work. You're going to miss some days of school. That's going to set you back in your employment opportunities, and it has an impact on your entire community. The entire city of Charlotte and the entire county of Mecklenburg suffer because of climate injustice and environmental injustice. And these folks are right. The climate just makes it worse, climate change. Environmental injustice has been there for decades. We've been dumping PCBs in low-income neighborhoods for decades, all that. But with climate change, things are getting hotter, floods are getting worse, storms are getting worse. All those areas with the pollution and the heat, they're getting worse. And so unless we begin to build our cities differently, unless we begin to really look at green infrastructure, it's not going to change. Next slide. There's also this great website called the Tree Equity Score. And so green infrastructure makes a big difference. It not only do trees produce oxygen, they have shade, shaded areas of Charlotte, the whole Myers Park neighborhood where they have the beautiful tree-lined streets. they can be as much as 10 to 15 degrees cooler on a hot summer day than areas of the city that don't have trees and have lots of asphalt parking lots and lots of highways. So this is another great website, Tree Equity Score. And again, you can see where 85 and 77 go in those low-income neighborhoods. Next slide. So the city of Charlotte's trying, as you asked about solutions, and I'll talk more about that when I get some good questions. They're trying. They've identified what are called corridors of opportunity. They're the formerly red line areas of our city. They're trying to focus investment now on those areas. And next slide. One of the cool things that just happened is we got a USDA grant, $1 million to not just put trees in low-income neighborhoods, but to pay to maintain them on private property. That is something that is absolutely environmental and climate justice. Because you talk to folks in low-income neighborhoods, they don't have the money to take care of trees. I've got big trees in my yard. It costs thousands of dollars when they fall on your roof or when, you know, or when they need trimming or they need feeding or they start to decay. People in low-income neighborhoods say, I can't maintain a big tree. This grant will put those trees in those yards and maintain them, not on public, but on private land. We need more neighborhoods doing that. It's very innovative. And again, unless you hear people talk about how it's hard to have green infrastructure because you can't pay a yard guy and you don't have the time and the tools, this is part of the justice. Next slide. There are other things that the city is doing. You've heard about community gardens. We have food deserts. Community gardens help that. They also help build community. They also help reduce crime. One of these headlines here, to combat gun violence, clean up the neighborhood. Not just taking graffiti off, clean it up with green infrastructure, cooling infrastructure, community gardens that bring people together. So you know who's supposed to be in your neighborhood and who's not, right? You get to know the neighbor's kids, that community building. But they have shown where there are parks, where there are places for kids to play that aren't really hot because they're all full of asphalt, but they actually have green infrastructure. The kids are less aggressive. They have outlets. Gun violence goes down, violence goes down, domestic violence goes down. So this helps the entire community. Next slide. And finally, yeah, I really should have, we should have done a tag team. This is the Clean Air NC project on the west side of Charlotte. Again, the west side historically underinvested, historically under-resourced, and they have put together a number of things. They're working in the community with community leaders, not saviors from outside coming in and telling them how to do it, but working within the community and the education, the monitors. We have folks who can go around and tell where the air quality is bad. I heard one use of that, an elderly, a bunch of elderly residents, the person would take the clean air monitor and go out and say, you guys shouldn't go for your walk today because it's really bad air. Because we know that older people have a hard time with respiration as well. And so they're actually using it in real time to help people know when it's healthy to go out. You can also look at the, the orange and the red that the Weather Channel puts out, but how great to have it right there in your neighborhood. So the air monitoring, the green infrastructure, the EV charging stations, strategic tree planting, and the advocacy and healthy air education. Because if you can't name the issue, you can't solve it. And a lot of folks, if you talk to people in these neighborhoods, they know that their air quality is probably not as good, but they don't know the history of why. They don't know the tools available to change that, and they don't know how to advocate. And that's what I'm going to say about the whole government solution thing. It's a maze. I mean, the Duke resource plan, that's just the beginning, right? Mm-hmm. It's a maze. We have several different local governments in Charlotte. We have a school board, we have a city council, we have a county commission, we have a central Atlanta council of governments, then we have state government, then we have federal government, then we have administration, we have the EPA, we have the DEQ, we have Duke, that's a regulated utility, that's a big part of the solution and problem. All those different things, you need an organization dedicated to following and studying to help guide you to where the advocacy is needed at the right time. I think I'm doing a commercial for you.
Yeah, appreciate it. That's in the mail.
There you go. I always tell people, if you want to know how to act and do it in concert with others, sign up for newsletters. There are other groups that have Sustain Charlotte and, Environment North Carolina. There are a lot of people who have newsletters about the Riverkeeper, how you can advocate when there are critical votes coming up. Absolutely, voting is a huge part. If we want policy change, we have got to get people to vote and to recognize the issues that are at stake. And, back to environmental justice, people don't know what that term means, but if you ask them, do you think you have a human right to clean air? Do you think you have a human right to clean water? 90% of people say yes. So there we go. It helps all of us if we can get advocacy and policy change and if people understand city planning, transportation, the way our buildings are built, the way our landscapes are built, all of that is connected to our health, to our mental health. We know that more parks, people have fewer mental health issues because green space is necessary for mental health as well. So all these things help all of us, but we especially need to focus on those areas that have been underinvested and under-supported and under-resourced for decades. We didn't get here by accident. There were conscious decisions. I'm gonna say one last thing, I'm gonna sit down. The other thing is that the environmental movement for too long has been too white. And we love to see diversity. I love the diversity in this room, the diversity of those watching. We need your voices. We need your energy. You are authentic. And the environmental movement finally is starting to get that too, because people in their communities know how to solve what's going on in their community and how to bring their neighbors along as, people who are trusted messengers. So doing all that, we are moving the right direction, but everybody here can play a role. How was that?
Excellent, excellent, excellent. Thank you so much, Jennifer. Thank you so much. Let's do a quick round of applause for all of our intros that we got here.
Is it coming out?
And I apologize for moving over. I was cued to move over. I was told that the Zoom folks couldn't see me, so I was just like a ghost voice in the virtual space earlier today. Well, we are here now at the moment where what you've been thinking about, what you've been crafting, you now have the opportunity to share it. So we have a mic runner. Vineka is one of our STAR Sustainability Studies students here, Environment and Sustainability students. I've got this mic that I'll run. She's going to run that mic. And we're going to start with a couple of questions in the room. And then for those that are in the virtual space, when you have a question, if you would raise that virtual hand, and then we can see with our tech folks and be able to come to you and answer your questions as well. You can type them in the chat, or you can unmute and speak them to us when we go into the virtual space. Who's got a question? All right, right here in the center, we've got two.
I think we're very fortunate in our community that we have a good corporate partner in terms of Duke Energy. And so we have lots of buildings with their name on it, and we're very lucky, and they fund lots of programs. My question is, do any of you have plans to speak truth to power and ask them directly to stop polluting the air, the land, and the water? By way of background, my ex-husband, who wasn't an ex at the time, built the first platinum level LEEDs house in North Carolina
Wow.
25 years ago. Because he is a Canadian citizen, he knew we should not have coal ash in our concrete, because Canada realizes that it is dangerous. It is not just a garbage byproduct of the process of burning coal, which is what Duke Energy convinced the EPA of a number of years ago, but it's actually dangerous. And so the concrete company wanted to know how we could possibly have a concrete floor in our house without coal ash. Well, they did it, and we had a beautiful concrete floor in our house. as a result of the coal ash that is deposited all over North Carolina,
Where's the question?
Erin Brockovich has gotten involved in the lawsuits against Duke Energy as it relates to the thyroid, retinal, and brain cancer clusters around the state. So my question, very long-winded, and I apologize, is, are any of you planning to speak truth to power to say, stop polluting the air, the land, and the water?
Thank you so much for your question and detailed comment. Tell me your name again, please. Angelina. Thank you so much, Angelina. Would panelists like to
Go
go? Go
Yeah.
ahead, please, Jeffrey. Thank you.
So I think it's a great question, and hats off to your husband for building a platinum LEED home. That's amazing, 25 years ago. So it's a tough problem, but it requires a fairly simple process, and it's using the knowledge that we have about what Duke is doing and getting as many voices as we can to speak up and to speak out. And I think the biggest problem that we have as a community is, do we understand everything that Duke is doing? And I think that is the thing that is probably the most pervasive issue that we have to overcome. And it's along with the financial implications of what they're doing, their practices in terms of what they're saying to the North Carolina Utility Commissions and what they're actually doing. And then getting them to a public forum to have that information made public. So one of the things, in addition to, I talked about a webinar series, we are challenging Duke to a debate. And we want them to come to the table and have discussions with us about what they're doing. And we will use that forum to ask them repeatedly to stop polluting our environment. Now, we also need the other side of the table, the political side of the spectrum, to be in our favor. And that's where there is an accountability component that elected officials have to understand, that they're not there for their own interest. They represent the people.
Yep.
And if they're not going to represent the people, we need to vote them out. And as former Mayor Roberts said, we have to follow the political process. So I hear a lot of people talking about the, people not wanting to vote. There's a lot of young folks in here. Hats off to the college students that are here, because Thursdays was Friday's first cousin to me. The fact that you all are here is important, but you all play an important role in terms of, you may not like the candidates that we have, but you have to like the issues that they're fighting for. And if we don't have our political officials fighting for what's important for the people, we have a choice. Every 2 years, we can get rid of Congress. Every 4 years, we can change the Senate. So we have that part of it. So my job and what I do as an organization is to take on Duke through the process of the North Carolina Utilities Commission, getting public voices to speak up, because that's what they want to hear. They don't want to hear from environmental folks. So my goal is to try to get at least 500 people and 5,000 letters at the end of the year that go right to Duke and go right to the North Carolina Utilities Commission and to the political folks that sit in Raleigh, to let them know we're tired of this.
So can I just want to add to that. The other thing, I'm sorry, I got to stand up. The other thing is that the city, so the Duke has to have public hearings when it changes its rate structure, when it changes its resource plan. There are public hearings, but cities and counties can also submit input. And I was really proud of the city of Charlotte this last time the resource plan came up, because they talked about the fact that not only are they polluting, their rate structure disproportionately hurts low-income ratepayers. Yes, so if the portion of their bill that is fixed, it doesn't change, is bigger than a lot of places around the country. And so if you're a low user, that hurts you the most when they raise that. And City of Charlotte called them out. City of Charlotte also talked about the same thing with pollution. And they're supposed to be helping low-income ratepayers. They're all supposed to be doing weatherization of homes to help people's utility use go down by insulating your roof and that kind of thing. but they weren't funding it with their own profit. They were asking people who are ratepayers to donate. So, but the city called them out on that too. So, talk to your local officials, talk to your county commissioners, do public health, incredibly important. Every official can have a voice. And a lot of times when I was on the county commission, if I called up my state representative and state senator, they would take the call because elected officials talk to each other. So don't let people tell you, oh, that's not me, that's the state doing that. They have a voice. Don't let them off the hook. And absolutely sign up for the Clean Air newsletter and they'll tell you when those hearings are and where. And I tell you, I heard a mother of a child with asthma talk about what asthma looks like, real and personal. I will never forget that. If you tell your story to a public official, that puts in their head what it looks like on the ground. And this mother, I tell you, it was very moving. A child getting sick in the middle of the night, missing school, throwing up blood. It was very moving. Use your stories.
Hold on a second. We need to get the mic for the Zoom folks, and then we'll go to Zach next to you who's got a question.
As you directed it to me, the discussion of rate is a distraction from the fact that they're killing people.
Yeah.
Let's talk about rate instead. Let's not talk about who's dying.
Hi. So, one of the things that, sorry, I'm also gonna stand up because I like to look at all of you. One of the things that's always been really important to me, as someone who came from a low-income household, a single-parent household, issues of environmental injustice always come down to the low-income families and the low-income neighborhoods. Yet those are also the neighborhoods that are facing numerous other challenges as well. So how do we bring this issue to those communities and help them understand that this is an important issue for them and that it's something that they can have an impact in when they feel like they're struggling in all the other aspects of their life, such as rent, financial security, even providing for like children or things of that nature. The last thing that's going to be on their mind is thinking about how they can impact the environment because they're just trying to survive. So how can we bring that conversation to them in a way that helps them understand that they can do both things at the same time?
I answer that.
Yeah.
We meet them where they are, plain and simple. Communities like that sometimes not going to be in a room filled like this. So we meet them where they are and we educate them, but we relate the story back to them. So it's a lot of storytelling, but it's also conversation. So that's kind of direct, plain and simple. But we here locally, that's what we do. And I invite you to get involved. Most definitely. I'm always be an advocate for the NAACP where we can change things. So we meet those where they are, have a lot of storytelling and try to fill it out because we can relate, right, something back to an issue.
So one of the things that the Biden-Harris administration did when they came into the office was they launched the Secure Environmental Justice and Equitable Economic Opportunity. And that program is just called Justice 40. Is an initiative and plan to deliver 40% of overall benefits of climate investments to disadvantaged communities and environmental justice communities that have historically been left behind economically and overly polluted. So I think to Jamel's point, the storytelling plays a compelling part of it because what communities have to do is band together to tell their story to anybody that is a part of this hub network. And North Carolina has, I think, 20 members that are in the Justice 40 hub system. And those programs cover climate change, clean energy, energy efficiency, clean transit, or affordable and suitable housing, training and workforce development, remediation and reduction of legacy pollution, and development of critical clean water and wastewater infrastructure. So I think the issues that you talk about are pervasive in terms of economic and they're called social determinants of health, right? And if you don't address those things, you know, people tend to repeat the negative history that follows them. So I think the thing that I would suggest is anybody in the room, contact my organization or any of the Rural Beacon Initiative is one of the ones that is part of the statewide organization. But those are some of the things that the government has put in place that was part of the Infrastructure Recovery Act and the IIRC to bring funds to these communities. So there are options out there. I think our challenge is making sure that the word gets out and that people know how to take advantage of it.
Thank you so much, Zach, for your question, and thank you for your responses. How are we doing? Doing well? Feeling inspired? Let's take one more question in the room, and then we're going to jump to a Zoom question.
So I just am interested in this green district and the strategic tree planting and the electrical vehicle charging stations. These are, I don't know many Black people or low-income people who have electric vehicles. And I'm concerned that these strategic planting of these trees is going to be very strategic to the point where it still is not going to benefit the people that it sounds like it should. And the maintenance of these trees, when you say on private property, is this privately owned by individuals? So that would also exclude quite a bit of those lower income people who may not actually own their houses or property as well. How is this really going to fix the problem?
I'll start and you finish. Okay, I'll start and then Jeff will finish because they're the one working on it. Private property means also if there are landlords, right? And the problem with landlords, they don't really care, right? They're getting their rent. They don't maintain a lot of times. Now, a lot of them do, but some of them don't. We have more and more corporations that are buying houses and people are renting from corporations that are in California or somewhere. So the idea is that even for a renter, if it's private, not a public park, that they will maintain the tree there. But absolutely hand in hand with that, you have to also have street trees and parks, you know, park infrastructure and all that. So it's not just for people who are homeowners, but any kind of private property where people are living. It could be, yeah. So absolutely, a really good point. And then you can add the EVs, the EV question. That's a really good one.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I think it's one of the things when we as an organization do anything, it's first with the voice of the community and it's driven by community. And so when you think about the theory of the case, when I think about the Historic Weston and the three individuals that really drove our partnership along with the community, they had a list of items that they wanted to see happen in the Historic Weston. And surprisingly, EV charging stations was one of them. And the issue is that there were a number of minority, Black-owned, women-owned businesses in the Historic Weston that wanted an EV charging station because the theory of the case is if people come to charge their EV, then they will wait for it to charge and spend money in the businesses that are there. And so it makes complete sense in terms of why you would put an EV charging station that is in a community that has been underserved and impacted for a number of years. But think about it, they're right off the freeway, right? Because we talked about the redlining phenomenon. And so that Historic Weston corridor is looking, you know, one of the projects that we're considering is with the city are electric charging facilities that can be used by the community during the day, but used to charge city fleet vehicles at night.
Yeah.
And the investment that happens there is partnered with the community. So if they put facilities and charging stations like that, we are negotiating with the city to create facilities that can be used for green training jobs. We are talking with the city about procuring land that is being unused so that we can turn it into urban gardens and other things that will benefit the community. So the community came to that conclusion on their own. And so as one of the other things in terms of leveraging Justice 40 money is also looking at clean transit opportunities, as well as remediation and reparation of some of the things that are happening with homes. We know in homes that were built before the 60s, asbestos is rampant. Remediation for that is part of the program that's covered under Justice 40. So the community has started to realize that if they don't participate in the programs and the initiatives, then they will continue to get left behind. So that was one of the rationales of why the Historic West End chose to, among other things, EV charging stations is something that they wanted to do. That was a great question, though.
It's a really good question.
Yeah, thank you so much, Josiah, for championing the question and bringing it to the table here. We're going to jump online for a moment and grab 2 virtual questions, and I'm going to let Andrew read those to us.
This question is from Aiden to Edgar. In terms of mapping, how do you determine advantage versus disadvantage in terms of water access and quality?
In terms of mapping?
Yeah.
Mapping?
That's an
Yes.
advantage,
Yeah.
disadvantage.
Well, in terms of our environmental justice mapping work right now, most of those environmental justice communities identified on our map are, based on demographic information, ethnicity, income. And then we overlay that with different environmental concerns like landfills or brownfields. We really haven't gotten into the water access and flooding issues impacting BIPOC communities. But that is sort of our next step now that we have this mapping story map developed, and trying to look at, where water quality is not what it should be. And I know in the case of the CAFOs that are in our watershed, we don't have a lot of the large hog farms like they do down east. We have probably about 20 of those that are permitted in our entire watershed. But we do have almost 290 million chickens are produced a year in the Yadkin River watershed. Wow. And there are, despite what people say, there are actual regulations that these folks are supposed to be following. The problem is no one is checking on them, and they don't have to have a permit, and they're able to do whatever they want to with the waste essentially. And so in our case, the demographics of where those chicken houses are typically more low income and not communities of color, at least in our watershed. And I remember when Jeffrey and I were on a Zoom call about defining environmental justice and how one does that, it really does come down to whether or not your community has the access to the tools and the people to make sure you have clean air and clean water.
That's right.
And it's not so much a racial issue ultimately as it is, are you in a position to achieve that for your community? And that's where I think we've had some success working with those communities. We have, like I said, a few what we call environmental justice communities in our watershed. One of them is the community of West Baden, which was developed as a segregated community when Alcoa first developed the aluminum smelter in the town of Baden back in the early 20th century. And that community has continued to suffer to this day. And they have been very clear about what they want. They want the hazardous waste that Alcoa buried there over 100 years to be removed, so it quits leaching into the lake, into the Yadkin River, into Little Mountain Creek, which goes into Lake Tillery. So the state has allowed Alcoa to essentially transfer their waste into our water and to impact these communities. And so that's what we're fighting for in that particular situation, just to get that community heard. And it's been a really frustrating experience to just see how the state caters to Alcoa, goes out to dinner with them, doesn't write strong permits, and then we have to go to Southern Environmental Law Center and sue them because the standards in the permit are too permissive. So I'm not sure that answers the question and got me off on my soapbox, but yeah, I do think the mapping tool is going to help us, back to Mercedes' original question, help us really educate these communities. Because what I found in trying to meet people where they are and going to East Winston-Salem instead of, Haynes Park, going into those communities, we really have to spend time just talking about how environmental justice is social justice, right? And I mean, that to me has been
Yep.
a really eye-opening experience because, yes, everyone has a lot of other more priority issues that they are concerned about. But at the end of the day, all the things that Jeffrey and Jamal are talking about, that adds up to social justice for those communities that were put in these places,
Right.
in some cases out of their control. Some of you may remember the Weaver fertilizer fire in Winston-Salem, which was now, I guess, the second year anniversary just came up of that. We still have seriously contaminated site, soil, water. And everyone like, well, those people, they knew that plant was there when they moved in there. And it was like, well, maybe that was the only place they could go because that was a red line community.
Right.
And so now here we are 2 years later, and all the excuses, all the foot dragging continues. But that is a great example. And some of the NC Clean Air monitors picked up just astronomical levels of pollutants from that fire. But there again, I mean, people say, well, they knew it was there all along. And I'm like, well, but yeah, that's the only place they could live.
Yeah.
We have a second question from Diane Thornton from Zoom.
Hi there. As you are all talking about environmental justice in areas that have marginalized communities, what about the areas in Charlotte that would not be marginalized financially, that actually are privileged? And yet what happens in those areas can affect all of us in the city of Charlotte as well. And so right now there is something going on having to do with the 4 Mile Creek Greenway that is in South Charlotte, a section of it along Rave Road, close to Pineville Matthews Road, where a company wants to raise 53 to 54 acres of established forest area.
Yep.
Okay, and in the process, build a 640 unit, I don't know what you want to call this. It's a conglomeration of different kinds of buildings that will not have affordable housing. It instead is for very rich retired people to live in. In the process, there are floodplains that will be affected, wildlife that will be erased, and that much acreage in terms of trees, when you're talking about a tree canopy and oxygen, breathing. And this kind of precedent seems to be in other areas of Charlotte, not just in this one place. And thinking about where can that line be drawn when it comes to city council members, because we've talked to them, saying, hey, this city is exploding with need when it comes to lodging, when it comes to residences. So all of these forested areas are in danger of becoming completely obliterated so that we can put up buildings. And again, could probably not even be affordable for most people in Charlotte. So is there any advice? I probably would love to go to our wonderful mayor here about this because she's dealt with city council in her time. And one thing, as we've talked individually, and by the way, I don't live in this exact area, but because I am very much concerned about the environment, I have gotten a little bit involved in it. Okay. And some city council members really are concerned about environmental issues in Charlotte. Others obviously are not. And if you come up with tree canopy being removed, we have been advised, those of us who have gone and talked, that really isn't going to be an argument point. What do you say to tell people that constantly chopping down trees and damaging floodplains, I find especially egregious, is an issue?
So this is another really tough issue, and that is the continued growth in our community. And a lot of that is driven by the fact that we are not on the coast. We're not subject to a lot of hurricanes. I mean, all the things that climate change is bringing and making worse, guess what? Charlotte is kind of, not as impacted. I've even had people tell me, oh, well, Charlotte's not suffering from climate change. Why should we care about it? I've had people tell me that. So what we see is an influx of people from all over, from overseas, from the Northeast, from Florida. We call the people from Florida the halfbacks. They start in the New England, they go to Florida when they retire, and they're like, oh, it's too hot here, and they come halfway back. So, so we have this struggle between development and health and natural resources and people having affordability, right? And developers have a lot of money. When I was mayor, they would come up to the 15th floor and they would go sit in those city council offices with their, campaign checks and that kind of thing, talk about why they needed to develop this and all that. This is a challenge across America. Every city I've gone to, when I've met with mayors across the country, the developers often get their way. However, the voice of the people is still important and can make a difference. And we do have watershed regulations. We do have air quality regulations. We do have a unified development ordinance now in Charlotte that a lot of people don't know is the way they're supposed to be zoned, the way they're supposed to happen. And that is, we want density so that we can maintain green spaces and maintain trees. We don't want sprawl. But a lot of city council members don't know about it, are not convinced. And I tell you, these personal stories, so you talk about people dying from what Duke Energy is doing. Yes, people die from heat. Like all those figures, the number of people dying from being overheated is going up. People die from asthma. I have a friend who talks about being in 6th grade and having her friend expire on the playground right in front of her from asthma. Okay, this is not just quality of life, this is life. And we have to tell those stories to those city council people. The challenge in Charlotte, there's not an environment committee anymore. When I was mayor, we had an environment committee that met and talked about transportation and buildings and green space, et cetera. The current mayor did away with that and combined it into the transportation committee. So citizens don't know what committee to go sit and listen to talk about environmental issues. Because yes, we need more public transportation and we need EVs and that kind of thing, but there's a whole bunch more besides transportation that contributes to clean environment, that makes it healthy for people to live. So it's a challenge. They need to hear from more people. If you do a survey of folks of where the environment falls on their list, in terms of food, shelter, affordable housing, all that, most Americans put it pretty far down. But if you ask them about clean air, clean water, you ask them about their health, it goes way up. So it's about connecting the dots. So you talk about higher income neighborhoods, guess what? We all rise and fall together. If we've got people going to the emergency room because they're having heat stroke, whose health insurance is going to go up? Right? We're all connected. This is an interdependent system. So whether you are rich or poor, black or white, if you don't have healthy air and water, you are not going to have good quality. You're not going to have opportunity. You're not going to have a good job. You're not going to be able to get educated. Like everything is connected. And the hardest thing I found in public office was helping connect those dots for people, because it's complicated. The 21st century is complicated, but that doesn't mean you can't understand it. And it doesn't mean that you can't see what's happening around you. And that's what we need to help our elected officials understand. And I tell you what, you got to speak truth to power. You got to not be afraid to say, well, that's just, you're killing people, right? If all those trees go away and that water quality is, and the floodplain is impacted, when we have actually bought properties and restored floodplain in Mecklenburg County. We bought out those houses because they kept getting flooded because the floodplain has changed. People have died in floodwaters, right? This is absolutely life. And that's what we need to talk about. So I have one more question before I sit down. Somebody wants to know, of the students in the room,
Everybody.
How many of you are registered? Actually, everybody. Who all here is registered to vote and plans to vote in March? Because that's the primary. Look at all those hands. I love it. I love it. I love it. Yay. Okay. That was a question from the audience that got snuck into me. So thank you all.
If I could build on
Yeah.
what the mayor said, I think one of the things, the public has a responsibility and a role in what I think her name was Diane asked.
Mhm.
About 3 months ago, the Historic West End was, heard about a development that was gonna happen in that area. And the citizens banded together and took out a petition. So that there is a process. If there's not a public hearing, you still have the ability to actively go and start a petition drive.
Mhm.
I know it sounds rudimentary and basic, but it works. So they got over 500
did.
signatures on this petition, and the developer backed out of the program.
Woo, yay.
So it was in a residential area. They were gonna try to zone it as commercial and put a manufacturing site there.
Remember that.
And the citizens of the Historic West End stood up. So I would implore, Diane, you can contact us at cleanairnc.org and we will help you with the petition process to try to get that changed. Because what's happening is developers are working with the city officials and they're not having public listening sessions. They're not having public forums to talk about the development that is happening. So as citizens, we have to force that process. So it doesn't happen. We all have to be actively participating in the process.
Excuse me if I interject, but I thought you might want to know, we have 17,000 signatures.
Okay. You're already
But
there.
I do want to refer somebody named Chip Starr to you, sir. And because we're still in the process of fighting this and don't know exactly how it'll turn out.
Okay,
Okay, thanks.
here to help.
Keep it up.
Thank you
Mercedes,
so
can I-
much. Oh, go ahead.
Since we're
Go
on
ahead.
trees, probably the simplest solution, the most effective solution for our water quality problems is to have riparian or stream buffers.
Mhm.
And I mean, the research is there, they work, the wider they are, the better it is. But as Jeffrey's saying, I mean, our entire regulatory system for land clearing, agriculture and forestry are totally exempt from that.
Mm.
So that's a problem that we need to fix at the state level. The permits required for sedimentation and erosion control do not have public notice, so we don't even know. But to really hammer home Jeffrey's point about citizen action, since I've been in this position for 5 years now, I have seen communities stop a quarry. I've seen them stop an asphalt plant. And they call me and say, can you do anything? I said, I can help you. I can support you. I can, give you our name, but your community has to do
Asphalt
this.
plant, yep.
And when Alcoa proposed to the state and the state was going to approve it to take one of their contaminated outfalls and put it directly into Baden Lake so it would be diluted and dilution would be the solution to pollution, we got 350 comments. And guess what? The state did not approve that.
Right.
And so, that kind of citizen action is absolutely critical. Now, we've also had failures.
Yeah.
We lost a huge battle in Forsyth County with a 500 housing unit development going into a beautiful upland farmland floodplain area right beside Tanglewood Park. And the local neighbors are just horrified.
Mhm.
But, I went to the county commissioners, they voted 7-0. I thought I had all the arguments. But, the developers had been there, 2 months before I got there. Yeah, and so there's a lot of that, but we're seeing the tide
Right.
change. And I'm really looking forward to reading this new book by an author from the Atlantic magazine called The Light Eaters. And that sounds like a kind of a crazy title, but it talks about how plants saved our world. And being light eaters, which you don't think about that, but that's a
great
pretty
title.
wild
That sounds
concept.
good, yeah.
And I don't want to come off as a flaky river keeper thinking that plants are going to save the world, but there is some truth to that.
This is a safe place
Okay.
to be a flaky river keeper,
Well,
Edgar.
I'm
You
always
are in
saying
good
long
company.
con.
You are in very good company.
Okay.
No, thank you very much for your responses there. And thank you to Diane and Aiden for those questions. Can you believe it is nearing 8 o'clock? I cannot. We really should have done like a 5-hour event
Oh,
here
no.
together, right? But I do want to take a question. Vaneka is there next to Sam, who's got a question for us. I know we'll probably just take 2 more questions. I can't believe it, but we'll do 2 more in the room and then close out with 1 question from everybody or for all the panelists, and we'll say goodnight. Go ahead, please.
So in our society, we see that it takes a tragedy to get our voices heard. So is there any way we can like skip that whole part to get our voices heard?
Yeah.
That was my question.
Yes.
Happy to pass you the mic. It's Dan, right?
Oof,
Dan.
takes a tragedy.
Je vous en prie. I thank you because you gave me the entree to something I wanted to ask. My name is Dan Durrett. For all the students in the room, pull out your cell phones. You can Google my name. I'll leave my introduction there. D-U-R-E-T-T. I am the former director of the Department of Environmental Education Programs for the United Negro College Fund. That was a hat I wore many years ago. What I would like to first ask is for anyone who was born after 1987, please stand. If you were born after 1987, can you stand? What took you so long to get here? In 1987 is the year that Toxic Waste and Race was published in the United States. That was 37 years ago. You're not done. Keep standing. Now, one of my favorite singers is Michael Jackson. So I want you to bring up on your cell phone Michael Jackson's Earth Song. Now you can be seated. For those born before 1987, please stand.
Yeah.
These are the wisdom keepers in the room. If you're a student, please get the name and phone number of one of my co-wisdom keepers, because this has been a problem for decades. Toxic Waste and Race, and Ben Chavis, former NAACP president, started that report. And that's where environmental justice comes from. My question is, how do we take the power that the post-1987 group has, which is social media, integrate it with the wisdom keepers, myself, who cannot navigate Facebook? How do we use the social media and the wisdom in the room and on this panel? It's an excellent panel. One, if I may, and I'll be very careful when I say this, one dimension that's missing is the faith-based connection. As a Nichiren Buddhist, I believe in the oneness of self and environment. So when you look at any faith tradition, there is that relationship between the individual and their faith, whether you're turning water into wine or whatever the tradition is. So I feel very honored to be here, and thank you for allowing me this short time. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you so much, Sam, and thank you so much, Dan, for really connecting that. If anyone on the panel would like to comment on Sam or Dan's points.
Well, on the last point, I think, one effective outreach strategy that we have is to go to churches and talk about creation care. And I think, like you said, all religious traditions have that value in creation, that whatever higher power you believe in or not, that is worth saving, and that there is a long-term plan. And so particularly in a more conservative area, our watershed, the Yadkin watershed, I would say is very politically conservative. We get a lot of traction with that, and we're sincere about it. I'm a person of faith. I don't wear it on my sleeve or talk about it a lot, but it's great when I go to the United Methodist Church in Wilkesboro or an African-American church in West Baden and talk with them about that, because that resonates with them. God created this for everybody, and it's an important concept. And as far as, having hope and trying to avoid the tragedy that normally is what it takes to get people interested and concerned, extreme weather, flooding, hurricanes. We've just got to do better in terms of our environmental policy. We have no state level regulatory framework anymore. It has been completely defunded. You talk about defunding the police. Well, guess what? They've defunded the environmental police.
Yeah.
And so,
Yep.
that is, we don't have people to go out and inspect. I mean,
Yeah.
I can call
Yep.
until the cows come home, but
Right.
it's just not happening. And I'm hearing from a lot of county commissioners, particularly down this way, that, developers are building these houses that are going to lose value and they're going to lose money. I mean, it's all being done under more revenue, more tax revenue. But as the old expression goes, talking about cows don't go to school. So that was a great argument for farmland preservation, that it's going to cost you less than what it will if you develop it, even if you have more money.
Cows don't go to school.
A
Maybe I
comment,
should.
I thought that was a wonderful question in terms of, how do you get out in front of it? And I think the gentleman that stood up and gave us the social exercise and engagement, I think it speaks to what this generation really brings to the table. And I think about social media a lot, right? I'm a Gen Xer, so I'm kind of caught in the middle. I'm good with navigating my iPhone, but I'm kind of bad at really hitting the issues so that people will pay attention to me. This generation has that in spades in terms of being able to grab attention and pull people in. My suggestion is you turn that outward and you raise the awareness about the issues that are important to you. If the environment is important to you, talk about that. If climate change is important to you or the tragedies that are caused by it, talk about it. And the more that you do that, and if you can build that coalition of people and engage your group of folks, there's power in numbers, and you all have always shown that you have the ability to kind of move things. So I would use that power. This generation, Gen Z, is the future. The folks that stood up in this room won't be here forever. My job, and I spent 26 years in corporate America, and I left that to do this work. And it's not about the money. It's not about the fame. It's not about any of that. It's about making sure that I leave this planet in the same condition that I was able to enjoy while I was here, so that you and your kids can do the same thing. So that's your responsibility. So I think that's what the gentleman's point was, at least part of it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, you don't have to be up here to make that change or title. I oftentimes tell people, this president behind my name or in front of my name does not make who Jamel Black is. I'm 1989, and trust me, he opened up a whole different panel discussion and conversation. Because when we talk about our elders, right, and the knowledge that our elders have, sometimes I struggle. I'm not going to get on my soapbox, but I struggle, right? I struggle because there's so much knowledge that our elders have. Sometimes they want to gatekeep it, right? They want to gatekeep it and not give me what they have done wrong or what they have seen wrong, so I won't make the same mistakes, or we can take that proactive measure. So I'll leave it up there. Like you started it tonight, take that voice and definitely keep pushing. Definitely keep pushing.
Good points.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that the Reimagining America project actually was started as a faith-led organization. And all that we're looking at in terms of environmental justice, healthcare justice, criminal justice, housing justice, all those areas come from a faith perspective, whether you're Jewish, Muslim, Hindu, Christian, love God, love your neighbor, and take care of God's creation, all right? That's something that really cuts across. There's a group called Green Faith that is very active in the Charlotte area, and they do a lot of things from that faith perspective. I do it more from a policy perspective, but absolutely that's important. And I just echo what everybody else said, ditto.
Oh, well, thank you so much. And I know I want to, Dr. Coster, I would
One
love to hear
question,
your
one more,
question. I
one
saw
more,
hands over
one
here as
more.
well. There's, we're gonna take it? Yeah? We're
One-
gonna take one more?
One
Can we
more,
do it?
one more.
One more.
Can we do it? Go ahead, Vanessa. to
Just
Dr.
one more,
Costa.
yeah.
One more.
How can we turn Fran Coster down?
You guys are amazing. You've been
Very
sitting here, no one's
grateful for
left. I
that
love it.
Courtesy, thank you. My name is Francis Coster. I have a doctorate from the Program for the Study of the Future about the future of the basic life support systems. And there is a level of hypocrisy in the current debate about climate change, pollution, the impact of various phenomena that's going on. Men's testosterone levels are dropping. Girls are having, are maturing years earlier. Temperatures rising rather dramatically. And when I speak on these topics, and I get people who are frequently wearing religious symbols or something, and they will engage in a hostile way instead of a clarifying way. I tripped over something about 2 weeks ago. This fellow was yelling at me from the back about an issue, and I said, what would Jesus do? The air went out of the room. It just, because the values that they were labeling themselves with were not the values that they were expressing. And it had a phenomenal impact. So let me offer that for you all to take. Thank you and for the courtesy.
Thank you so
Thank
much, Dr. Coster.
Can we please take a question?
Closing.
Oh, sure. We've got, yes, yes. We've got one more over here. Jamella's saying we had one more to take over here as well. Please go ahead.
All right, a lot of pressure. Hi, my name's Kristen. I work with the North Carolina Conservation Network, and yeah, a couple of months ago, I got to attend the Mecklenburg County Environmental Justice Framework meeting that basically allows public to come in and say what they'd like to see in the framework. So my question is, has there been any movement on that? I haven't heard anything. And is there something happening like that in Rowan County or Forsyth County or
Ooh.
North Carolina in general?
Good question.
Anything in Mecklenburg?
You said the Mecklenburg.
Yeah,
Go
you can
ahead.
start with Mecklenburg. I mean, Mecklenburg, they are doing a good public engagement process and trying to work with the city. Not every town, so Mecklenburg has 6 towns in the city of Charlotte. Not every town has a sustainability officer. So this, another thing that you can do if you live in a small town is ask them if they can get a sustainability officer. And it may be a part-time or maybe half-time, maybe the planning and the sustainability person's the same or whatever. But having somebody whose responsibility is to look at, you know, where water quality, air quality are going, how development impacts that, that makes a difference. So, but Mecklenburg County is still, they're still collecting information and they want to coordinate with Charlotte, especially with the planning, the UDO, to make sure that Mecklenburg is listening. This is the other challenge with government. We have, you know, we have the county does public health, but the city does infrastructure. Those two are so connected. We just need to get them to talk. So constituents can do that.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Yep.
And Kristen, we are pushing to have more community voices be a part of that discussion because part of the process where they had a consultant come in ended. And so there were a number of community organizations that did not get a chance to voice some additional feedback and some of the things. So I think there's a slight delay in the feedback process of what they found. So Aaron Stanforth would be the one to kind of contact. So.
Yep.
Well, thank you. Thank you so.
Okay.
No, go ahead. Did you want to do it?
Oh, we have,
Go ahead.
City of Salisbury does have a state sustainability coordinator, that works, full-time, sustainability coordinator. So Ally is her name, correct? Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, and I would just say, I was just contacted by one of your coworkers with the Conservation Network about his efforts to work with local health departments to research and study disparate health impacts related to the environment. And he did mention specifically that Rowan and Cabarrus County health departments were both interested. So we're talking about that next Friday to find out what they're interested in. So yeah, I think it's getting into some official channels and hopefully that'll help raise the awareness.
Well, again, thank you so, whoop. Hello, hello, yeah. Thank you so much for your patience. Thank you so much for your questions. Take the opportunity to flip through the little handout that we handed you out via email that has all of the bios of our speakers and their contact information. They are more than willing to receive additional questions that you might still have. So feel free to email any of us. Also sign up for the information, Clean Air NC, with the Yadkin River Keepers, with our local NAACP. Get in the mix of the events, right? And really learn what's happening. I've got one last question, right? And we don't want you to forget to please provide us with your feedback. If you don't happen to have a smartphone and you would, we have a couple that are printed out. So if anybody in the room would rather fill out the survey in paper, it's very short. We have a few here that we can share with you. But I've got one last question for the panelists. It's going to be short. They're going to give a 1 line, maybe a 1.5 line response. It's going to be very, very quick. But on behalf of Catawba College Center for the Environment, and on behalf of the Reimagining America Project, and on behalf of the local NAACP as your sponsors for this event, we're really, really, really grateful for your time, your attention, and all of the good wisdom in Dan's words, all the good wisdom that you brought this evening. So the final question that I have, again, super quick responses we're going to get. But do you have a recommendation for the folks in the room that are interested in this collective action, interested in feeling, the change, the tangibility of the change? One resource, it could be a book, a website, it could be a song, something that you would direct the audience to, just to sort of uplift, stay connected, stay engaged, and make this moment become part of the movement.
I'll start.
Start with Jamal.
It's plain and simple. I would ask that you not only get involved with your period. Join our local NAACP and our environmental justice program, which Mercedes do sit in, she spearheads and help us with that. So we would love to have you, most definitely.
So I would say the environmental space and climate and sustainability is such a wide range of things that you have the luxury to figure out what you're passionate about and dive in, because there's so much to do and we need so many people that there's plenty of work to go around.
I would say you are more powerful than you think. And even one phone call to a state legislator, House or Senate, even one phone call can make a difference, especially if you connect that issue, that's your favorite issue, with your personal story and tell that story. It can absolutely make a difference. So, and one more thing I wanted to mention, if you come across people who are skeptics and you want a great website that, especially if you're like into the science and the nerdy stuff, you students will love it too. It's called skepticalscience.com. And it's kind of humorous, but he goes through all the climate denier arguments and he answers the simple way and then the scientific complicated way. And it's really fun. I learn a lot just cruising through it. So that's, if you want to have an answer to the deniers, there's a place to go. But absolutely pick an issue, use your voice, and vote.
And I don't have a specific resource to recommend, but Yadkin River Keeper, other river keepers around the state, we do advocacy trainings and prepare people to go in front of their county commissioners or talk with their legislator. We do a lobby day. So I think, as others have said, getting engaged in the political process, I know that can be difficult, but doing it in an issue-oriented advocacy, nonpartisan way to start with. I mean, eventually, we do have to vote and elect people that care about the same things we do. So that, and I'll stick with the light eaters, even though I haven't read the book yet. But,
Thank you so much to our panel. Please, a round of applause for them. And on your way out, as you safely make your way down the elevator and or stairs, well, or stairs, you can't really be in both unless you came back up and went down the whole thing. But please do grab another mojito or tea, grab another plate full of goods on your way out, back to your dorms or back to your homes. Please don't forget to fill out this survey. Really appreciate your time. Thanks so much.